Welcome to Real Talk with the Roses. We're finally back.
We are.
We missed last week.
We did.
Had a little bit of stuff going on. Wasn't able to answer any of your questions, and I, for one, missed that.
Yes.
Probably won't be able to be here next week.
Nope. We got stuff to do.
Yep, we'll be out of town next week, so probably won't be able to film a Real Talk for you guys next week, so it'll be the week after when we'll be back on track. But we did want to at least stop in tonight and take care of some unfinished business, really, from the last conversation that we had as far as affairs and adultery and boundaries and all that good stuff. So you ready to tackle this?
Yep.
All right, here we go. So last time that we spoke with them, we were asked the question about how to overcome an affair. And in the midst of talking about all that, we mentioned boundaries. And there were several comments that came in about boundaries and want to hear more about setting boundaries on a relationship. So that's where we'll go tonight. We're not going to necessarily answer a brand new question from the original questions that had been sent in, but following up with that one. So if you haven't yet watched that one, I'll have it linked for you down below. You'll want to make sure that you go back and take a look at that. Even if you have not yet encountered some type of affair in your relationship, maybe you know someone who has, and that might help them just a little bit. One of the things that we had talked about as far as safeguarding a marriage against affairs is placing boundaries around the relationship. So let's talk about that and define for everybody what you think a boundary is and why it's necessary.
I think a boundary for me is just another word would be safeguard. I mean, a safeguard would be synonymous. And you know, one of the biggest boundaries for us is we don't be with a member of the opposite sex alone. I mean, that's probably the biggest and the foremost rule that we've adopted and we abide by.
Okay. I'm glad you used the word safeguard, because one of the ways that I like to describe boundaries with the teenagers that we work with, and actually we've even done this in children's church with the real small kids, teaching them about setting boundaries on their life. A lot of times people tend to look at a boundary as something that locks them in or is restrictive. Would you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in order to free up your mind to be more pliable to the idea of the necessity of boundaries, you have to change the way you think about them. So let me try to paint a picture for you just real quick. Imagine that you are in an area that is known for lots of bears and wolves and coyotes and that kind of thing. A lot of dangerous type of animals, and you want to keep them away from your yard where your kids can go out and play safely. In order to do that, what do you think you're going to do?
Put up a boundary.
Put up a boundary. You're going to put up some type of fence, whether it is what's the electrical fences? What are those called?
Electric
A hot wire fence, electrical fence that can kind of shock animals as they come. But if you have small kids in the yard, obviously you're not going to want to do that. So you might put up barbed wire or just regular chain link or whatever it takes. You are going to put a boundary around the perimeter of your property as a safeguard for your family. And that's kind of the way that I like to look at boundaries in our life, whatever it is. But we are specifically speaking in this episode about relational boundaries. It's not something that's constrictive to keep you from enjoying your life. It's actually, like you said, a safeguard to keep some dangers out. Have you ever looked at boundaries as constrictive, and have you ever been at a point where you hated having them? What's been your view, or maybe your change of view over the years with boundaries?
I don't think I've ever felt that, but I mean, for me, a lot of it is most people don't understand you having those boundaries, and they think you're over the top by having those boundaries. So you're kind of the odd man out, kind of.
Yeah, and probably one way where you see that a lot is in your job, in your profession, because Most of you are aware that he is a law enforcement officer, and so you have female officers, you have male officers, and sometimes there are training situations or zone partner situations where a male is partnered up with a female, and that is one of the things that we have always tried to avoid as much as we could because of the danger. You know, let me just put this in perspective for some of you that maybe have never thought about, or maybe just have kind of thought, well, that's just ridiculous. You used to work what was called peak shift, and you went in, what was it, 5 in the afternoon till like 3 in the morning?
Yes.
Yeah, it was something like that, 5 in the afternoon till 3 in the morning, and
that was at the PD.
Yeah, that was back years and years ago when you were still at the police department. And sometimes, and not every night because the weekends were pretty hopping, but sometimes around 1 o'clock in the morning until that 3 o'clock hour, things kind of died down and got quiet.
Yep.
Wasn't a lot to keep you busy. And imagine having a female officer in the car with you, or ride-alongs. Some of the dispatchers used to like to do ride-alongs back then. Is that something that they actually still do?
Some, only the new ones.
And I'm not even sure if every department throughout the country even does that.
I don't know.
But back then, it was probably more common practice.
Right.
If the dispatchers got bored or it was kind of a slow night, they would want to get out and ride with one of the deputies. But the danger in that is, it's dark, it's late, you're alone in a confined area with someone of the opposite gender, and although it may start off somewhat innocently at first, it can quickly escalate into something more than that. Yeah. And I can remember back, because that was one of the boundaries that we had set right away, that there were times that people did want to ride in you, and there were times that, if we're honest, that boundary was crossed and that you did let a few in your car.
I don't remember letting a few in my car.
You don't?
No.
There was one in particular that I can remember, and I had a huge problem with it, and I already knew that she had had affairs with other guys at the PD, and you were young and what I would consider kind of a people pleaser, and you didn't want to tell her she couldn't ride with you. So I was babysitting her little girl and met her outside one night when she went to drop the daughter off, and told her, "You're not riding with him anymore." Remember that?
I remember that, but she hadn't ridden with me yet.
Yeah, she did. She had ridden with you twice. And of course, her thing back to me was, "I enjoy riding with him because he's so polite and I don't have to worry about him coming on to me." You remember that?
I remember that vaguely, but I really don't remember her.
It's been years ago. It really has been a long time ago. And she said, I feel so safe with him, blah, blah, blah. But she understood where I was coming from, and I nipped that right in the bud, because I was full aware that the affairs she had already been having had stemmed from her being too close to some of these guys. She was married. The men she was cheating around with were also married, but they had put themselves in too many situations to where one thing led to another, and before you know it, it just wasn't good. So that is definitely a boundary that we all these years have kept. And even in your position now, let's talk a little bit about sometimes the unavoidable situations, because most of you are aware that I am an ordained minister, and with that sometimes comes the need for counseling, and sometimes that is counseling with a person of the opposite gender. In your situation, you are the boss now, and you have an office 8 to 5 every day, and you have female employees who are now up underneath your command. And there are times when you have to either administer discipline or whatever reason that you need to call them in your office. So let's talk about how we have set up boundaries in those situations, because obviously mixing with the opposite sex is going to be a natural part of life, but there are ways we can safely handle it. So what are some ways that we have set up that we handle those situations?
Well, one thing we talked about is, if you have to be in that particular situation, you bring another person into the environment so you don't have that one-on-one contact. Another thing that we do is, if a person does come into the office, the door stays open. So there can't be anything said either by the person coming into the office or by outsiders knowing who's inside the office and rumors starting. So a lot of it is a safeguard, but a lot of it is just rumor control as well.
Yeah, absolutely, because sometimes it's nothing that you have done or would do inappropriately at all, but it is the perception that it gives people. I can remember one time years and years ago, someone had made the statement, even if I see you hitchhiking on the side of the road because your car broke down, I'll go to the next store and call somebody to come get you, because I never want them to think that I am picking up the opposite sex on the side of the road, because people just don't know. And I know in our culture, I mean, we live in such a laid back, lackadaisical culture now, to where some of what we're talking about seems real foreign. And especially those of you of the younger generation, setting up boundaries and saying, what is the big deal? Like, this probably is a very foreign concept for a lot of you. And I know that. I know that even a lot of the teenagers that we have worked with, they have grown up in homes where mom and dad is no longer together, and they see mom dating or they see dad dating a lot. They see the authority figures in their lives in situations where they're with the opposite gender alone, and they're not really taught the safeguards on how to maintain protection on a relationship. And we get it, we know, and we probably seem like old dinosaurs, but this has helped us last almost 28 years now. July will be 28 years, and I firmly believe that had some boundaries not been there, we might not would have made it this long, because there are temptations out there every day.
Or there may have been a slip on either one of our parts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's possible.
So that is definitely one of the boundaries that we have, is not being alone with the opposite gender. And if we find ourselves in a situation where we kind of have to be, then like he said, we either leave a door open, or unless the door has window in the door or something like that, or bringing someone else in with us. But even beyond that, like, I'm home with the kids, and it has just been a rule and something that we have made together. I don't let men in this house when you're not here, unless it's a construction guy that's coming for a repair or something like that. Just as a safeguard, because what we have found, and a lot of affairs that happen between best friends, and people always stand back and are so baffled. How could that happen? She was my best friend, or he was my best friend, because they got too comfortable.
Yeah.
They got too comfortable, and they spent too much time and inappropriate time together, and before you know it, one thing leads to another because hormones start raging. We need to talk about in a video just about the body and chemicals that are put off, because there are certain chemicals that a woman's body emits that a man will detect, and it's all done unbeknownst to us, but it does happen. So when a female and a male are spending a lot of time together, even though they're not husband and wife, eventually they're going to feel an attraction together that is totally chemical. You know, like you hear people say, we got chemistry. It's actually very true. It's actually very true. And so that is some of the reasons why there has to be safeguards in place and boundaries that are placed there. Some other boundaries that we have are about texting. You don't have any females programmed into your phone.
You?
Yeah, me. And family, of course. And I don't even know if you even have any of the teens or the young adults that we have been working with. Some of them have moved on now, so I don't even know if you still have them. There's a few of them that I have programmed in my phone, the teenagers, because obviously with announcements and different things, we have to be in constant contact. But I don't have guys programmed in mine. I'm even trying to think on my YouTube channel. I don't even think, there may be one or two male channels that I may be subscribed to that are like cooking shows, like Curtis Stone, or one of the musicians that, like Colton Dixon, all of you have heard us talk about him, things like that maybe. But as far as just like a guy's channel to sit and watch him a lot, don't do that. I'm very careful even with the amount of people that I have on my friends list on Facebook. You don't even have social media.
Nope, nothing.
He doesn't have social media. And one of the reasons for that was because when Facebook was beginning to be a thing years ago, we had started getting contacts from people that we had gone to school with, and there were people that you had dated that we really didn't want contact with. You didn't want contact with them. I certainly didn't want them having access into our life, and so he thought right away, it's just better not to even have it. And we have even known of friends of ours whose ex-girlfriends or even just party friends from school would post throwback pictures on social media and get them in big trouble with their spouses for things that had happened years ago in the past. And so you've just chosen to stay away from it. And obviously you guys all know that I have the social media, but I'm very, very careful with it. And even if I do allow some of the guys to be accepted on my friends list, like fellow ministers or different things, Facebook has safeguards and blocks where you can block people from seeing certain content. So I don't give them access to our pictures. I don't give them access to personal information that I might post about myself, only like general ministry type stuff that I would happen to post. And I'm full aware that in both of our positions, you're going to have contact with the opposite gender, but we really do try to be as careful as possible with that. There's no texting back and forth and all that stuff. People get in big trouble with the texting, and it can lead to sexting really easy. And we have counseled with people who've been through that, whose husbands started sending bad pictures and receiving bad pictures, and before you know it, one thing leads to another. And so that is another way that you really need to set some boundaries over the personal contact. We don't do lunch with the opposite gender if we're alone.
No.
We don't do dinners or any of that.
No.
Most of the time, if you go on a business trip and if it's allowed by the sheriff's department, I go with you.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we'll be gone next week. That's a training you're going to. There's only been one that I can even remember in all these years that you went to that I wasn't able to go to.
Yeah, because we were housed in a dorm.
Yeah. And then got snowed in and couldn't make it home. So that was interesting because we had never been apart that long up till then. That was really strange. So that is another way. A lot of affairs happen, or I wouldn't even call it an affair, just flings happen on these business trips. And, you know, whenever you've been in the class, you can hear them talking. We watch them down in the evenings, down in the lobby of the hotels and meeting up with people. And it's just dangerous. There's no sense in all of that. So we're very careful about when we accept things. If I accept a speaking engagement to go somewhere to speak at a church or some kind of event, then I have made it to where he can go with me. And most of the time, our entire family will go. Just to add some of those safeguards on the relationship. What other kind of things can you think of or boundaries that we have?
Can't think of any others.
Passwords.
Oh, yeah.
We have passwords to each other's stuff. Sometimes one or the other of us will forget them, and he'll be like, well, sign on this email, but I don't know the password. But it's not because you've kept it from me. Right. It's not because I keep it from you. It's just because either we forget or whatever. You have full access to all of my social media if you wanted to check it at any. We even do that with our kids. We even have that safeguard with our kids. And they never know when we're grabbing a phone to check. And I know that kids can still delete stuff, but our kids have been real good about being honest and open with us. But at any moment, we have passwords to everything they have. He knows the passwords to my stuff. I know the passwords to yours. And if your spouse has something that they're not wanting to give you a password to, that is a huge red flag. A big one. Because there should be nothing secretive between a husband and a wife that you guys don't have access to. So that could be a big red flag, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
Big time. And probably in your profession more than a lot of others, we've gone through all of these years. A lot of the people that you have worked with have ended up in affair situations and being divorced. And I mean, what percentage of the people you work with do you feel like's probably found themselves there?
Probably about 60 to 70%.
Yeah,
probably.
it's a pretty high percent.
Yeah.
Do you think, would you say that it's because of a lack of boundaries in a relationship, or what do you think that the main reason in what you have experienced would be?
I think that probably has a lot to do with it because most of those people don't have any. And the secondary thing is it's just a lack of integrity.
Yeah, definite lack of integrity. But we have seen it time and again. We had a good friend of ours who several years back had ended up in a business type situation, was traveling. There was another woman who was also traveling from the company, had a few innocent dinners together at the hotel, and then before you know it, he was conversing with her more than he was conversing with his wife. That's what we talked about last week with emotional and mental adultery, by the way. And before you know it, not only were they having dinner down in the restaurant, she was visiting the room. It's not a good thing. If we could warn you guys about anything, if you're not married yet, you guys need to establish some boundary lines before you even get married. And if you are in a situation where your prospective spouse doesn't want a boundary, run. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, because that'd be a big red flag.
Yeah, it'd be a huge red flag, a huge red flag. And I know that, you know, people are all brought up different. You know, you maybe have been brought up in a home to where, you know, opposite gendered friends were just in and out all the time around your parents, and it may have seemed like everything was okay. And a lot of the times nothing ever does happen, but you certainly don't want to allow the possibility, because we've explained to you guys before, we have a very real enemy who is seeking with everything in him to destroy the family, to destroy marriage, and he is going to set you up. And if you don't have a boundary and you've let your guard down even for a moment, even for just a moment, then he's going to rush right in there and take advantage of the situation. So boundaries are huge, huge. Can you think of any other boundaries that would be necessary for a good relationship, a healthy relationship? We've talked about the phones. We've talked about social media accounts. We've talked about being alone with the opposite gender and texting. Are there any other things that you can think of as a good boundary?
Think of any more.
Sometimes it's kind of hard to think right off of the cuff, as far as those are really the major ones. I think those are the biggest ones, because those seem to being alone, just being alone with the opposite gender, meeting for those lunch dates or whatever. You know, a lot of the people that you work with that have had affairs interdepartmentally, what do you think the percentage of that has been?
Probably about 40 to 50.
Yeah,
it's still kind of high.
It's still kind of high, and some of them have met the people they've cheated with on calls. So it's, you know, even in ministry, that we, you know, when we go through our trainings and our studies, it's even been proven that sometimes when you help people through counseling, especially if it's the opposite gender, more so women towards a male minister, but it can happen a male towards a female minister as well, that you kind of become their hero. Even in your job, you know, you go rescue a lady from domestic violence, you're all of a sudden her hero because you just rescued her from a spouse who was beating her up. And it's a syndrome that they will feel like they have an affection towards you, when that's really not what it is at all. But they mistake what they're feeling. They mistake all of that in a high tense situation. And then before you know it, feelings can develop. And if you're not careful, for me as a minister, that could be flattering. Or for you in your position, that could be flattering for a girl to think you're her hero. And it can develop even out of stuff as innocent as that.
Yeah.
And so you just have to, I don't think you can be careful enough when it comes to safeguarding a marriage, do you?
No, and the only thing that came to my mind is just being completely honest. When there has been something that was done or you found yourself in a setting, because I remember the one particular incident where I got a birthday card from somebody and I was like, So, and I brought it to you and told you. I mean, it wasn't anything I solicited, but it's something I got.
Yeah. And that helps build trust. Because if a husband or wife knows, like for me to know that, okay, he knows I'm not going to like this, not that I'm mad at you, but the situation, but yet you still are open enough to come and tell me, then that lets me know you're open and honest with me and you're going to tell me when things get inappropriate or could be heading that way. And the same vice versa. I've always been more than open with you. And I think that that builds a trust. If you're hiding stuff, no matter what the reason, maybe you just feel like you're afraid of your spouse and you don't want to tell them because they're going to get upset or blow a gasket or whatever your reason may be for not telling them. It is the secrecy that breeds distrust. And so you want to nip that in the bud. So I agree. Always be forthright, open, and honest. Even if you were completely innocent and it was going nowhere, if somebody corners you. And I remember one time whenever I was working at a job and the guy came in and wanted to rub my shoulders. Do you remember that? And of course, I pulled away real quick, and he was used to doing that with everybody in the office, and none of them ever told him no, but I told him no right away, and he was kind of shocked by that. He wasn't trying to be inappropriate, but I know where something as innocent as that seemingly could lead, and so I came home immediately and told you the very same day, can you believe what he tried to do? And, you and he were good, talked fine, y'all became friends, and there was never any like hard feelings or animosity, but probably most of that was because I was so open and upfront with you, and you knew the trust was there that you didn't have to worry. So I agree, definitely be open and talk about it. But any last thing that you can think of as far as boundaries?
Thank you.
I want them to hear from you from a male perspective, just a wrap up of how important you may think it is. Because I think sometimes for women, it may seem to be a little bit more important to guys, because a lot of times guys just think they have the tiger by the tail and can handle any situation. And sometimes men don't see it as important as women do. And so let them hear from a male perspective how important you feel that it is.
Well, for me personally, if it's important to your spouse, it should be important to you, because you should be considerate of her thoughts, her feelings, her concerns. Just like you said many times, only a woman knows what a woman is thinking, and a lot of times why she does what she does. And a woman can pick up those cues to where a man may not. So it's very important to have that communication and that dialogue.
And so how important do you think it is as far, like, let's just say the boundary of not having a girl in your office alone? How important do you think stuff like that is?
Well, all the boundaries are very important, because it goes back to my marriage is more important than anything else. So, and that's what I fall back on.
And sometimes it's hard, just kind of to close this down, like you said at the very beginning, sometimes you're looked at as the oddball, the weirdo, because nobody else, it seems as though people around you may not have the same boundaries, may not think twice about closing the door, may not think twice about allowing the opposite gender to jump in a patrol car and just ride around and different things like that. And sometimes you have to fight that, because being a people pleaser and always worried about what people think of you can lead to the death of you in so many areas. Not even just relationally, but in a lot of areas. And I think you do have to come to the place to where you are only concerned about what God is thinking of you and that you are pleasing Him every day. Secondly, what you and your spouse are thinking of each other. And thirdly, between you and your entire family, bringing the kids into that. Because at the end of the day, when it is all said and done, you're going to stand before one. And He is going to judge your life on everything. And so you've got to make sure that you please Him. And second to that, your relationship with your spouse is the most important relationship that you're going to have. You become one. You're part of each other. And it is absolutely more important. Now that can get on an unhealthy level, and we can talk about that next time, because I know we're kind of running long on time here. that can go to an unhealthy level, and you can have spouses who are just very controlling and jealous and manipulative, that needs to be dealt with.
Right.
Before it can go to an unhealthy level. But as far as just the average, common sense, everyday boundaries, your relationship needs it, and your relationship depends on it for sure. So, what do you want to say to them in closing?
See you next time.
I want to say to you, put up those fences and build those boundaries. By all means, feel free to message me, DeeVine DeeZine at yahoo.com. We will be happy to answer any other questions that you may have, to talk to us directly about some boundaries. Maybe your boundaries have been a little weak and you want to know how to beef them up, or maybe the boundaries have been crossed and now you're trying to recuperate from that, and we will help you in any way we can. So be sure to look down below for all of my contact information. Thank you for joining me again.
You're welcome.
Don't forget, we probably won't see you next week in Real Talk, but we will be back the week after that. Until next time, we hope that you all enjoy your time.